Support for Steppin Out comes in part from the Kristovich family in honor of Mary Lou and Bill Kristovich. This program is sponsored in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support the arts and culture in the greater New Orleans area.
I'm Peggy Scott Laborde, and welcome to Steppin Out, with updates from the local restaurant, arts, and entertainment scenes. Joining me, Poppy Tooker, host of Louisiana Eats on WWNO Radio. Hey, Poppy. Hello.
Hi, Peg.
Love the hair. It looks great.
Thanks.
Looks great. Ian McNulty, food writer for the Times Picayune, New Orleans Advocate. Hello, Mr. Ian. Hi. Doug MacCash, who covers the arts and culture scenes, also for the Times Picayune, New Orleans Advocate. Hello, Doug.
Hello.
And Alan Smason of theatercriticism.com and the Crescent City Jewish News. And as our hearts go out to the victims of Hurricane Laura, we look back at 15 years since Katrina and at the impact it has had on the arts, dining, and theater scenes. Poppy, your post-Katrina memories include the preservation of a beloved local culinary landmark, doesn't it?
Yes, I had been acquainted with Leah Chase prior to the hurricane, but I had an opportunity to have a lunch with her in Breaux Bridge with our mutual friend, Dr. Jessica Harris, in December of 2005. And it was clear that really there wasn't a plan. Nobody was coming to help reopen Dooky Chase restaurant. And so when Leah and Dooky moved into a trailer, which was across the side street, I just started to meet with her as often as I could and work out a plan. Now, here's Leah once the mold remediation happened. They had enough insurance money so that was done, and they ran out of money. Jay Nix, John Foles, they were trying to help very early on in the spring of 2006. But by November, the last week in November in 2006, they'd completely run out of money. And the future looked really uncertain. And that's when my good friend Ashley Graham, whose photos these are, by the way, who was with Share Our Strength at the time, Ashley and she rushed in to help. And she was doing these tragedy tours. And thanks to Ashley, she brought a bunch of executives from Timberlane, from Starbucks through. And 1 month later, before Christmas in 2006, thanks to Ken Lombard, who was then vice president of entertainment for Starbucks, Leah Chase got a gift of $180,000 that was directly passed through. It was an unprecedented amount of money from Starbucks that Ken Lombard shepherded through. And that's what really helped reopen Dooky Chase Restaurant. They reopened in September of 2007. It was just takeout for a little while, but the rest is history. My goodness, even this year in the pandemic, right after Stella lost her husband, Wayne Reese, the Chases carried on, and we had Holy Thursday, even this year. And all of that was so uncertain in January of 2006. God bless her. There she is, my good friend.
And the family continues, and her legacy.
Absolutely.
It's good
you
news.
saw that FEMA trailer. That's my biggest memory of that time, was Mardi Gras Day 2006, when Leah told me to go in the trailer and make ham sandwiches.
Thank you so much, Poppy. And moving on to Ian. And Ian, you got back pretty early, and if we can do a plug, you even wrote a book about your early experiences, which is very, of course, a great, there's so many books about Katrina, but this is certainly one of my favorites, and I ain't just saying that, okay? A Season of Night, New Orleans Life After Katrina. But tell us about some of your memories.
Oh, appreciate that feedback, Peggy, very much. Hurricane Katrina, of course, played out on this grand scale, this epic catastrophe. But, it really affected people household to household, family to family, neighborhood by neighborhood. And when I got back into town around, the early fall of 2005, that's what I was living. That's what I saw. That's what I decided to write about. A lot of people were covering the big meetings and the sort of the high level stuff that was happening to bring New Orleans back. Well, we're living it on our porches and in the streets and in the little restaurants that opened, and just sort of that incremental march of through this really hard time, but towards better times. And if anything has resonated through the pandemic for me with this experience, it's that even when things are really dark, there's moments of levity, there's moments of humanity. There's a lot of spirit that's still there that helps you through, that helps you get, past these horrible scenes that you're seeing every day to the other side. You do it together. You do it with your neighbors. You do it with your community. I lived in Mid-City, where I still live now, same house that went through the storm. This is not that house. This is just one from around the corner. But this was the landscape, just destruction everywhere. Really, really could get you down. But then you would run into New Orleans people. And as the time went on, the idea of just giving each other a hug and saying, how'd you do? And how are we going to get through this kind of became more of, well, hey, we're still New Orleans. We're still here. We're still New Orleans people. And we're working through this. Here's a day I'll never forget. This is the Shades of Praise Gospel Choir singing on a neighbor's porch there. That's on South Pierce Street here in Mid-City. Just, all around you were signs of devastation. And from the highest levels, sometimes it was hard to see how we were ever going to get through this and come back. The guidance was so hard. But the individuals, the New Orleans people, that's what really gave you the fuel to get up and go and do it again. And, for all the pain and suffering and death that this storm visited on our community, there still was a lot of joy. There was the joy of being back, of thinking for a little while that maybe New Orleans, wouldn't be back, and to see evidence every day that it was coming back, and you were part of that. Your neighbors were part of that. Very inspiring.
Absolutely.
Anybody out there and just affected by this recent hurricane who thinks this.
Well, thank you so much, and we'll come back and, of course, talk restaurants. But next over to Doug. And Doug, you were kind of back early on, too, especially for the Times Picayune, weren't you?
Yeah, I was among the reporters that volunteered to stay in the city and report on the flood and the aftermath. And so I got a front row seat to that slice of history. Funny thing, I had no journalistic background. I came up through the arts and became an art critic. So I had to take a learn-as-you-go crash course in crisis journalism. And one of the things that I took away from that, looking back on it, is that Katrina coincided with the rise of digital journalism, so much so that the two things are inseparable to me. The printing plant where the newspaper was made was surrounded by water, so we couldn't put out a paper. So for the first 3 days, the Times Picayune went digital. Later, it was printed in Homa and then Mobile, and we reporters even delivered stacks of papers sometimes to New Orleans in addition to the rest of our jobs. We wrote in the offices of the Homa Courier, staff members' houses, the hoods of cars, in the Sheraton Hotel. And we became the mobile digital journalists that we would be in the future. It was a proving ground for those things. And it was lucky that we did, because we were able to reach New Orleans' scattered population that way, which we couldn't have done with the newspaper alone at that time. We blogged for the first time. I didn't even know what I was being asked to do when I was asked to blog. And I happened to have the first thing I ever blogged. And this is what I wrote. Ant balls are not an urban myth. In addition to all the other horrors befalling New Orleanians during the flood, was the creepy discovery that red ants form themselves into floating clusters to avoid drowning. As Dante Ramos and I paddled along Carrollton Avenue on Wednesday, I saw two glittering golf ball-sized masses of ants. floating beside our canoe.
That's incredible. And Doug, of course, we should mention that the Picayune was nationally recognized for the coverage, wasn't it?
We did. We received 2 Pulitzer Prizes for our coverage, and interestingly, I'm told that was the first time Pulitzer Prizes were awarded for purely digital coverage at that moment. And I hope it's true, because it would mean that the Picayune and that New Orleans were in the vanguard of the digital journalism movement.
All right. Thank you, Doug. And over to Alan. Alan, first, some personal memories, and then on to the theater, huh?
Yeah, well, Peggy, unlike many folks, I was already out of town visiting my sister in Cleveland when that storm was basically headed towards the Panhandle. Of course, Friday night I had dinner, and then Saturday it made a beeline towards New Orleans. It filled up most of the Gulf like no other storm I had seen. And unlike most people who had already evacuated or who were out of town like I was, I actually have a photograph taken by my cousin, Sizzy Smith, that's in a boat as he was passing my home. I had 5 feet of water and toxic waste in my home. So while many people have photos of the damages after the fact, I actually have this shot taken during the height of the storm. And of course, as the waters receded, it was 7 weeks before I could get back home, and just a few hours before having to go back to Cleveland. But I did get some shots of the exterior with the well-known X code that identified the rescue teams, the time and date, the hazards present, and of course, unfortunately, the number of victims. And photos of my downstairs interior with the mold and mildew showing amid what was once the finest record collection in the country. You can also see the books that were saved, marked by the red X's there, all Beatles books, I might say, and also, of course, the Antoine's cookbook, I might say also. Thank you, Poppy. And as far as the theater community, there was very little population at the time, so as to warrant theater productions, at Thanksgiving, I think the city's population was only about 80,000. But one of the first productions in 2006 was I'm Still Here With Me. That's Ricky Graham and Jefferson Turner, who that literally ran for years at Le Chat Noir. And indeed, Le Chat Noir proved to be the major outlet for theater, even though it was intended to be a cabaret. One of the great stars, of course, to appear there finding her way back from Broadway was, of course, our own Leslie Castay, whom I dubbed the Queen of New Orleans Cabaret. And she's seen here with the proprietress, Barbara Motley. In addition, 2 notable works were played in 2006 and 2007. We might remember the outdoor productions of Waiting for Godot with our native son, Wendell Pierce, and the NOLA projects, Get This Lake Off My House. That was a retelling of The Tempest. The Saenger Theatre, Peggy, and Mahalia Jackson Theatre, of course, were both damaged heavily. The Saenger wasn't able to reopen until 2013. And the Orpheum, home to the Louisiana Philharmonic Orchestra, was so heavily damaged that only the concerts were able to be played in churches throughout a 5-year period, basically until 2015 when the Orpheum reopened.
All right, Alan, thank you very much. And back over to Poppy. So we've come a long way, haven't we? But the landscape is very changed, isn't it, in some places?
Changing landscape, I would say, yeah, that's this theme. So once upon a time, there was West End. Do you remember how that was, Peggy? And I was out there this week, and West End, as we know it, it's never going to exist again. It was really a big deal when Station 6 reopened. Now, that took us, look, that's where all of that wonderful, wonderful Fitzgerald's, my oh my, gone. Nothing of that seems to ever want to be coming back or going to come back. But anyway, Station 6 reopened sort of near where Sid Mar's was. That didn't happen until 2016. And of course, the Hong Kong, what an incredible landmark that disappeared for good. And that part of the lakefront, that's just barely come back in a way. Frisbee's was a real landmark reopening, and that wasn't until 2013. And of course, now that's Felix's. They took over the space in 2018, but it's just shocking, all the changes, and the lakefront illustrates that the most. And of course, the growth, where we never thought we'd see growth. Peg, you ever thought we'd eat down in the Bywater? So that pioneer, that was really Maurepas Foods in 2012 when Michael Doyle opened up. Of course, he closed in 2015. That was when St. Roch Market popped up, like almost miraculously. That was a familiar sight, and I think that helped drive more people from the other side of Canal Street down there. And now, of course, we just continue to see the unbelievable growth on St. Claude Avenue. But the treasures that we did manage to keep. Mandina's, from 1932. They spent $2 million to get reopened in 2007.
And those photos are incredible. Del Hall, I have to thank Del Hall for those photos. The water line, Bobby.
And when I went back to Mandina's, I cried because the inside was so different. But that's because what Cindy tried to do was just bring it back to maybe more of the way it was in 1932. And the food remained exactly the same, just like the food in places like Brightston's, one of the biggest celebrations that happened New Year's Eve 2005, when Frank and Marna reopened Brightston's. There was such celebration in the city that night.
Absolutely. Thank you, Poppy. And on to Ian and some trends that you've seen since Katrina.
Right. As Poppy was saying, so many changes. But for me, if we take a look at the legacy of Katrina on our dining scene, it boils down to three big trends. One is the explosion of Latin American flavors around New Orleans. We had a few traditional taquerias, a few traditional Honduran, Central American restaurants around town before Katrina. But the demographic shift is so many people, so many Latino people came to New Orleans for the rebuilding effort. And so many of them decided to stay and make their homes here and build their businesses here. The Latin American restaurant scene is a permanent change to the New Orleans dining scene. From these little taco trucks that are still everywhere and some of my favorite places for a snack to full-fledged restaurants all across town. And it shows no sign of slowing down, such diversity there. Another thing, Peggy, is before Katrina, the lament was, oh, well, New Orleans food is great, but gosh, could someone please just make a New York-style pizza? Could we get a bagel shop? Could someone do, I don't know, Eastern European comfort food? All of those things arrived here in short order. In the years after the storm, a new generation of New Orleans people started opening up their restaurants, and a lot of transplants who were brought here by the success story, by the story of New Orleans rebuilding. They wanted to be part of that. They started opening up restaurants here. That diversity of styles of restaurants has never been richer in the time that I've been covering New Orleans food, and it continues to evolve and change. The third one, it kind of runs counter to that, but it's two sides of the same coin to me, is I think a greater appreciation for truly traditional New Orleans, only in New Orleans food and restaurants. Because let's face it, after Katrina, we all had to face the possibility that these places were not coming back, that our grand traditional restaurants and our neighborhood joints that do not exist anywhere besides New Orleans may have been wiped out by the storm, never to return. Well, they did return. Here's Angelo Bricata's that they opened in 2006, just a neighborhood cornerstone. Same goes for Antoine's, Galatoire's, the grand old restaurants, the neighborhood joints, Mandina's, as Poppy mentioned. These are places that come out of the cultural landscape of New Orleans. And as New Orleans rebuilt, these places came back with them. We certainly did lose quite a few invaluable restaurants, which is sad to this day. Mandich, where are you? But it's really remarkable what did come back. And it's a lesson for now because all of these restaurants are fighting for their lives as we speak. So don't forget them now.
Yes, they are. Yes. Thank you, Ian. And over to Doug. And Doug, you were really afraid for many reasons, I'm sure, after the storm, but especially for arts and culture in New Orleans. Traditions.
It's true. I was dead wrong about everything after Katrina. I thought with the diminished population and the need to rebuild, the loss of tourism, I thought the last thing that would be a priority in New Orleans would be the art scene. I didn't really expect it to come back the way it was at all, and I was wrong. It not only bounced back, it bounced back with unbelievable vigor. Think of the St. Claude art scene didn't exist, or practically didn't exist beforehand. There were a couple of galleries. We had Prospect One, the great international art exhibit that took place in 2008. The commercial success of Julia Street, those galleries that were had been around for 10 years or so on Julia Street, they did very, very well in the aftermath because the population of New Orleans bought artworks. They replaced those things that had been damaged. And lastly, the arrival of Banksy, the British graffiti artist who sort of sparked a street art scene that continues to this day. So the art scene not only survived, the art scene came back strong after Katrina.
Thank you so much. And over to Alan, theater. We were worried about that too, but...
Yeah, well, there was a resurgence of new theaters, Peggy, as the recovery effort took off. Again, although we lost Le Chat Noir in 2011, 6 years after the storm, Mid-City Theater sprang up with Sue Gonzi from Le Chat and Fred Nucio. And of course, although it's no longer with us for a long time, they were in Mid-City doing theater. In addition, Rivertown Repertory, formerly run by Charles Ward, became Rivertown Theaters of the Performing Arts, and under new management from Theater 13. More emphasis on musicals and children's plays at that revamped original theater now named the Lanyap Stage. And the biggest news in Jefferson Parish continued to be JPAS, Jefferson Performing Arts Society. They had a massive new complex that was built along Airline Drive, the JPAC, and also, of course, on the West Bank, the Westwego Performing Arts Center and its smaller sister Teatro Wego venue emerged as much needed theater space as well. So, we've had quite a number of new theaters, including the National World War II Museum's Stage Door Canteen, which opened as a new performance space to showcase acts like the Victory Bells. But since then, of course, it's been renamed BB Stage Door Canteen, and they've had a venue there for original productions like On the Air that's seen here, as well as dramatic pieces like Biloxi Blues and Ain't Misbehavin' and Dames at Sea. Meanwhile, Southern Rep, of course, which had been at the Canal Place location for almost 2 decades, lost their lease. They got a new home on Bayou Road now. But for a 6-year period there, they were having guest venues at the CAC and the new Powerhouse Theater at the Ashe Cultural Center. They had productions like Pulitzer Prize and Tony Award winner Next to Normal, and of course, Moises Kaufman's 33 Variations, which you can see here, and regional premieres like the Tony Award winner Fun Home ran at NOCA. And speaking of NOCA, let's not forget the new Broadway series that was produced by Marc Cartali, a New Orleanian by choice. That started at NOCA with major Broadway stars, performers coming down such as 6-time Tony Award winner Audra McDonald. And of course, we had other Tony Award winners like Patti LuPone, Beth Level, Christine Ebersol, all hosted by Sirius XM host Seth Rudetsky. The mayor of Broadway is the interviewer. And finally, Le Petit weathered a financial crisis, and they emerged in a new partnership with Dickie Brennan and Tableau. And we should not forget their opening in 2011 with the play Lombardi and the Lombardi Trophy on stage shortly after the New Orleans Saints won the Super Bowl, to which we all say, "Who dat?"
All right. Thank you so much, Alan. And, of course, now it is time for one last memory. Poppy.
Well, the happiest place on earth. That was November 26th, 2005, when we were able to reopen the Crescent City Farmers Market at Uptown Square. Ben Burkett was there ringing the bell. For a long time, that Uptown Market was the place where people went to find each other, their friends and neighbors they couldn't find after the storm.
Yeah. Ian.
Friends and neighbors, Poppy, you nailed it there. That's what it was all about in that fall. I'll never forget going into Lola's restaurant, the Spanish restaurant on Esplanade Avenue, on its opening night, seeing the place packed with people, seeing kids run around the restaurant. I hadn't seen kids in so long. It was great. And then by the end of the evening, everyone in the place just banging on their glasses, raising a toast to the chef, the now late Angel, who came out humbly from the kitchen and got a standing ovation by people who were so glad that he had brought their neighborhood restaurant back. We'll never have a paella there without remembering that.
Doug.
Considering where we are, right on the edge of City Park, my memory from that period was the morning after the storm. James O'Byrne and I bicycled into this area to try to see what the effects had been, and we encountered Canal Boulevard, which was a river at that time, that proved to us that there was an ongoing flood. It was more than street flooding, and that was no more than 5 or 6 blocks from here.
All right, Alan.
Finally, Peggy, I wanted to relate a short story about Beth Israel. That's my synagogue. And it was devastated by 10 to 12 feet of water, and how its 7 Torah scrolls were rescued by Rabbi Isaac Leader of Zaka. That's an Israeli group that came to New Orleans to rescue people, but eventually removed those Torah scrolls by boat after there were no further victims to rescue. I was sent these photos by Zaka and distributed them nationally, where they were published by other press groups like the Los Angeles Times, and was erroneously given credit for taking the photos. But one of the series of pictures actually chosen by the Smithsonian Institute to catalog the destruction from Katrina. The Torahs were later reburied a year later after they were buried first off and then taken up and then reburied at the old Beth Israel Cemetery on Frenchman Street.
All right, and some quick memories of mine, just how many people who came in with representing various organizations and just volunteers on their own to help rebuild houses through Habitat for Humanity and many other groups too. It was just astounding, the church groups as well. And then from a media standpoint, of course, the curious case of Benjamin Button is framed within a storm, and which we, of course, would think of as Katrina. But so much money, they spent so much money filming. Most of the movie is filmed in New Orleans, and that really helped after the storm in terms of the economy. By the way, a bit of a trivia piece, that the press tin ceiling at Crescent City Steakhouse is actually a holdover from some scenes that were shot there. They retained it and looks like it's been there all along. Also, we can't forget Treme, the series Treme, which based a lot of its characters on folks trying to come back and work on their houses in the neighborhood and the tragedy and the spirit and the hope. The Treme very much embodied that. Well, thank you all so very much. And yes, 15 years and growing, and we know we are in the middle of our own crisis right now, but we can only hope and pray. Thank you all very much. Goodbye.
Support for Steppin Out comes in part from the Kristovich family in honor of Mary Lou and Bill Kristovich. This program is sponsored in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support the arts and culture in the greater New Orleans area.